Hi, I'm Zach Singerman, and welcome to the Gen Z Jews Learning from Leaders series. In this series, I'm interviewing national leaders on the topics of anti-Semitism, Israel, and leadership. Today, our guest is Joel Rubin. Mr. Rubin is the executive director of the American Jewish Congress. He is also a media commentator and the Democratic strategist for Democracy Partners. Mr. Rubin, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my honor. Thanks, Zach.
So, could you just give a little brief snapshot of the American Jewish Congress and your role within it?
Happy to do so. The American Jewish Congress is an American Jewish legacy institution. We call it a legacy institution because we are one of the original organizations founded by the Jewish community in its early days, in our early days here in the United States. We were founded in 1918. We were founded by great Jewish American leaders, Golda Meir, Rabbi Stephen Wise, Albert Einstein, people who really were at the leading edge of what it meant to be an American Jew back in the early part of our time in the United States. And it's an amazing experience. We sit on, we have a seat on the membership of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. We are active in politics. We are active in defining what we believe are critical challenges to the Jewish community and in trying to communicate those and express those in the media as well as to policymakers. And my job as executive director to manage and oversee those operations and ensure that we're doing our work effectively.
And could you just explain to Gen Z kind of what you did as the Jewish outreach director for the Bernie Sanders campaign?
Oh, happy to do so. It was really an honor of a lifetime to serve on a presidential campaign. It's one of the unique experiences in politics and public policy to be in the midst of a presidential race. And as you know, Bernie was a highly competitive candidate last cycle. Mm-hmm. And so my role as Jewish outreach director was to help him engage the Jewish community and help him to define his policies related to the Jewish community, as well as to engage non-Jewish communities on behalf of Jewish issues. So that ranged from issues like domestic issues like Tikkun Olam, and within that bucket, we would say racial justice, dealing with climate change, income inequality, a lot of the real serious domestic issues that we face here at home. And then, of course, anti-Semitism and the challenges the community faces as well. And then in addition to that, on the national security side, foreign policy in terms of Bernie's views on Israel and the senator's views on how an American policy towards Israel should proceed. And I have a national security background professionally. I served in the Obama administration as a senior official at the State Department. I also worked in the United States Senate as a national security advisor to two senators, and brought that experience into the discussion as well in helping him to and the campaign to engage the Jewish voters.
And not that all Jews are supportive of Israel, but in a very progressive campaign, was support of Israel difficult?
It's always difficult to communicate ways that show support for Israel in various audiences. Quite frankly, I think we take it for granted. We believe that Americans support Israel, and that's just it. And at a superficial level, they do. But when you get underneath it and go into issues and policy, that's where challenges come. So my work in the community on the campaign was in many ways about trying to find those sweet spots. Where was there overlap? Where was there a way to communicate that supporting progressive views on Israel weren't inherently anti-Israel? Supporting peace with the Palestinians could ultimately mean defining a firm border for Israel on its eastern side and having clarity and a safe country. I've got a lot of friends and family in Israel. I've lived there for a year of my life. I lived on kibbutz. I studied abroad at Tel Aviv University. So to me, it's very deeply important that we have a safe and secure Israel. But finding that language is a challenge. And as you know, our politics is very divisive right now. And there's a lot of finger pointing. I think as American Jews, we are in many ways caught in between cross currents that sometimes overlap and crunch us. That is something that for candidates for office, they're always dealing with, because the goal of a candidate at the end of the day, as we all know, is to win more votes. And you win more votes by having voters think that you have their back, or that you're doing something that they support, or that you're advancing on their behalf. So as a Jewish advisor, my job was to figure out how to get more votes and lose less votes. And when it came to the Jewish community, that meant engaging the community in trying to understand what the needs were, where the opportunities were to build that kind of political support.
So what do you think we as like Gen Z, or even like millennials and Gen X, or everyone, should be doing to fight against QAnon and these other types of anti-Semitic organizations?
Yeah, you're really at the front end of this, and thanks for asking that. Because you're a generation that's grown up on social media, you're more attuned to it maybe than people my generation, Gen X, where for the first 25 years of my life, there was no such thing as social media, let alone the internet was barely a thing. And now we've seen only in the last decade plus a real torrent of hate online. And so being clear in our minds and in our communications about what is real hate and a threat versus what is noise. And as you engage in your work, trying to not get overwhelmed by the idea that just everything is bad, right? Like everybody says bad things and it's all awful. Actually trying to figure out for yourselves, what are the ways to define serious threats that could be harmful to people, that could really damage our community, versus noise. Because the concept that we're going to completely eliminate hate is one that we want to hold near and dear in our hearts, and we do want to pray for it, but we aren't going to get there if we think that we have to get rid of everything. We're going to have to chip away. And so my recommendation is to chip away at the hardest and most complicated and pervasive and upfront threats that we see. So I'll close with this. For us at the American Jewish Congress, we're looking at online anti-Semitism, the spread of QAnon and conspiracy theory. We're looking at a platform called Gab, which is a den of anti-Semites and neo-Nazis and haters, and trying to pull out what the dangers are of that online platform, where Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman who's a QAnon conspiracy theorist, she raises money on that platform. Well, that's a red flag. So we want to focus on that. There's a lot more out there, but if we can focus on that and try to point out how it's not good for a member of Congress to raise money from neo-Nazis, that is a win for our cause. So I encourage you to really target your efforts.
And what are your... Speaking of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, what are your thoughts about like this new America First caucus in Congress and how it's like blatantly anti-Semitic and racist?
I mean, it's so demoralizing to see people articulating white power in the halls of Congress. And America First is a concept. It goes back to the 40s, and it was essentially a nativist theme that was used by people who essentially didn't want to get involved in World War II. Well, look where that would have taken us if we would have let the Nazis completely run over World War II. We need to stand up for America's values. And that's what's so nice about being an American Jew, because our values and America's values are in sync. We, at the American Jewish Congress, I know I sound corporate when I say that, but we are promoting not just Jewish ideas, but we're promoting a better America. Martin Luther King was promoting civil rights for African American community, but also a better America. And so, for your efforts to think through how do we advance the Jewish community, but by doing that, advance the United States, advance our original creed, make us a safer, healthier, happier, more inclusive country. And so when someone comes out and says America First, that means America for them and not for us. That's anti-American. And so what we have to make sure we do is we point it out. And if they claim, well, I have a right to do it, we say, you have a right to do it. But that doesn't mean we don't have a right to point out that you're a racist. We will. And identify and isolate the problem and shame them and make it toxic. So anyone who signs up for that, they should know that they will be described, as they appropriately are, as anti-Semites and racists. And I think that's the key thing. The America First notion, put on my national security hat, means America alone. And America alone is a weak America. And a weak America is bad for the United States. It's bad for our allies. It's bad for Israel. And we should always reject the idea that we isolate from each other. We should be inclusive and together.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything else you would like to just say to the Gen Z community?
Oh, keep up the fight and keep up the flame, and remember that you're here for you, and you're here for your generation, your families, and ultimately you're going to get pressures to be involved in certain aspects of Jewish life. The key thing is to look within yourself. What do you want to be as a person, as a young Jew, as an American Jew in this case? What do you care about? What are you passionate about? There will always be people who are looking to ask for your support and advice and maybe want to get you to do things in a certain space. And because you're a very powerful constituency, the next generation, the Gen Zs, I think you need to define for yourselves, what do you want, right? What is it that you're trying to see happen? What do you want our country to look like? And you can advance that, and people will follow.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rubin, for coming on today. It was really great having you, and thank you for just speaking about these issues.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks for your leadership.
Thank you. Bye.